The roar of the private jet died in the middle of a bright Tuesday morning, but the silence that followed was louder than any explosion. On the runway of Meridian Aero Works, a $10 million engine sat open like a wounded heart, surrounded by engineers who suddenly looked like boys caught cheating on an exam. And standing beside it with a mop in one hand and grease on his sleeve was a single father named Cashin Vale, the janitor everyone had learned not to see. Before this story unfolds, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that no human being should ever be judged by their uniform, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your support helps stories like this reach the hearts that need them most. Cashin had arrived before sunrise, as he always did, pushing his cleaning cart through the polished glass halls of Meridian Aero Works while the city still yawned under golden morning light. The building belonged to Serafina Crowe, the feared CEO of one of the most powerful aerospace companies in the country. Her name was printed on magazines, whispered in boardrooms, and feared by employees who had watched her fire people for speaking too slowly. To the world, she was a genius who built an empire from nothing. To the workers beneath her, she was ice in a designer suit. Cashin was not supposed to matter in that world. He emptied trash bins, polished floors, cleaned oil spills, and kept his head down. At 38, his shoulders carried more than a mop bucket. They carried unpaid medical bills, school fees, rent notices, and the fragile hope of his 9-year-old daughter, Maribel, who waited every evening in their small apartment with a drawing taped to the fridge and a smile that made every hardship feel survivable. Maribel had a weak heart, and every hospital visit reminded Cashin that love could be both the greatest strength and the deepest terror. That morning, Meridian Aero Works was preparing for a historic demonstration. Investors from 3 countries had flown in to witness the launch of the company's newest luxury jet engine, the Asterion X9. It was supposed to be Serafina's masterpiece, the engine that would secure billion-dollar contracts and silence every critic who claimed her empire was built more on pressure than principle. Cameras waited. Executives smiled. Engineers stood stiff in their expensive suits. The sun shone over the runway like a spotlight. Then the engine failed. At first, it was a cough. Then a violent shudder. Then a screaming metallic grind that made everyone step back. Smoke curled from the casing, warning lights flashed, and the test pilot killed the ignition before disaster could tear through the runway. The investors went pale. The engineers scattered around tablets and diagrams. Serafina's face hardened into something sharp enough to cut glass. For nearly 2 hours, the best minds in the company argued over the engine. They blamed sensors, fuel flow, thermal misalignment, faulty data, even the weather. Cashin cleaned quietly near the hangar doors, but his eyes kept drifting toward the open engine. He saw something the others did not. Not because he was smarter in that moment, but because once, long ago, before tragedy and betrayal buried his name, he had understood engines the way musicians understand songs. A senior engineer barked at him to move away. Serafina noticed. Annoyed by the delay, humiliated before investors, and eager to turn someone into an example, she looked at Cashin and gave a cold laugh. She asked why he was staring as though he could fix what her engineers could not. The hangar went still. Some employees smirked. Others looked away, embarrassed for him. Cashin should have lowered his head. He should have returned to the spill near the fuel cart. But he thought of Maribel waiting for surgery approval, of the bills folded inside his wallet, of the years he had swallowed his truth because survival demanded silence. He stepped closer and said softly that the failure was not in the sensors. It was in the bypass compression rhythm. The timing was wrong because someone had changed the turbine calibration after certification. The laughter stopped. Serafina's eyes narrowed. She dared him to prove it. Her voice was cruel, dressed as confidence. She told him that if the janitor believed he could fix a $10 million jet engine, then he should take the wrench and save the company from embarrassment. Around them, phones lifted. Someone whispered that this would be good. Cashin looked at the engine, then at the crowd, then at the small photo of Maribel tucked behind his cracked phone case. He took the wrench. What happened next felt impossible. Cashin removed his gloves, rolled up his sleeves, and moved with a calm that did not belong to a cleaner pretending to be clever. His hands knew where to go. He asked for a diagnostic tablet, ignored the engineer who refused, and read the numbers upside down from where the tablet sat on a crate. He pointed to a sequence buried deep in the data logs. A post-certification override had altered the thermal response curve. The engine had not failed by accident. It had been made unstable. The chief engineer, Orson Valles, turned red and insisted Cashin was guessing. But Cashin opened a side panel, exposed the calibration unit, and showed the altered seal. The room shifted. Investors leaned in. Serafina's expression flickered for the first time, not with anger, but fear. Cashin worked for 43 minutes under the white glare of the hangar lights. Sweat ran down his temples. Grease blackened his fingers. Twice, his hands trembled, not from uncertainty, but from memory. He remembered another engine, another company, another day when he had tried to warn people and nobody listened because the truth would have cost powerful men too much money. He remembered being blamed for a failure he had predicted. He remembered losing his license, his career, his wife's trust, and eventually his wife herself, who died in a winter crash on the way to a hospital while he was still fighting a lawsuit he could not afford. By noon, Cashin stepped back and told them to start the engine. No one moved. Then Serafina gave the order. The Asterion X9 came alive with a low, clean thunder. No shudder. No smoke. No warning lights. Just power, smooth and steady, singing across the runway as if the machine itself had been waiting for the one person honest enough to listen. The investors clapped, but the sound felt uneasy. This was not victory. This was exposure. Serafina approached Cashin slowly. She asked who he really was. Cashin wiped his hands on a cloth and answered with the name he had spent years hiding, Cashin Ardent Vale, former propulsion architect of North Star Dynamics, blacklisted after refusing to approve a dangerous engine design. The oldest investor gasped. He knew the case. Many did. Cashin had once been called reckless, unstable, disgraced. But standing beside the repaired engine, with Meridian's own data proving sabotage, the old lies began to crack. Serafina demanded the full report. Cashin did not flinch. He told her the override matched a proprietary shortcut used in Meridian's rushed production models. He had seen the same pattern before. Corners cut. Safety warnings buried. Engineers pressured to sign. Failures blamed on lower staff. His voice did not rise, but every word landed like a hammer. He told her that her empire was not being attacked from the outside. It was rotting from within. The boardroom that afternoon became a courtroom without a judge. Cashin stood at one end of the table in his janitor's uniform while Serafina's executives tried to tear him apart. They called him bitter. They called him unqualified. They called him dangerous. But Cashin had copied the data logs before they could erase them. The files showed altered certifications, hidden test failures, and internal messages approving shortcuts to meet investor deadlines. The signatures led higher and higher until they reached Orson Valles and two board members Serafina had trusted for years. But the final file destroyed her. It showed that Serafina had been warned 6 months earlier. Not directly, not clearly, but enough. A report had crossed her desk. Her assistant had flagged it. Her engineers had begged for delay. And she had written only 3 words in response: launch as planned. For the first time, Serafina Crow had no answer. The woman who ruled every room sat down slowly, her face stripped of power. Her empire, built on speed, fear, and perfection, was collapsing under the weight of one janitor's truth. But Cashin did not look victorious. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had not wanted revenge, only justice. Outside, the afternoon sun poured over the runway. Employees gathered behind glass walls. Reporters had begun calling. Investors were leaving. Sirens could be heard in the distance, not loud yet, but coming closer. Serafina followed Cashin into the hangar, where he was packing his few belongings from a metal locker. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. She asked why he had never told anyone who he was. Cashin looked at the little drawing Maribel had made of him wearing a cape and said that the world listens to titles, not truth. When his title was taken, so was his voice. Something in Serafina changed then. Not all at once, not magically, but painfully. She saw the man she had mocked. She saw the father who had cleaned her floors while carrying knowledge her highest-paid engineers could not match. She saw, perhaps for the first time, the human cost of her ambition. The investigation that followed shook Meridian Aeroworks to its foundation. Executives resigned. Board members were arrested. Contracts were frozen. News channels called it the fall of Serafina Crow's empire. But the truth was more complicated. An empire did fall, yes, but something better began in its ashes. Serafina sold 3 private properties to create a safety restitution fund for workers silenced by corporate pressure. She stepped down as CEO during the investigation and publicly admitted that arrogance had made her blind. Many called it a performance. Some never forgave her. Cashin did not rush to forgive her either. Forgiveness, he believed, was not a gift owed to those who finally felt guilty. It was a door that opened only when truth had finished doing its work. 3 weeks later, Cashin sat in a hospital waiting room, holding Maribel's hand before her surgery. He had expected another denial from the insurance company. Instead, he received a call from an anonymous foundation covering the full cost. He knew who had done it. He did not call to thank her. Not yet. He simply bent over his daughter's hand and cried silently, because for the first time in years, hope did not feel like a cruel joke. Maribel survived the surgery. Months passed. Cashin was offered jobs from companies that once refused to answer his emails. Universities invited him to speak. Reporters wanted the tragic genius story, the janitor who saved a jet engine and destroyed a billionaire empire. But Cashin chose carefully. He accepted a position leading an independent aviation safety institute, one built to protect whistleblowers and give young engineers the courage to speak before disasters happened. On his first day, he did not wear a suit. He wore clean work boots and carried Maribel's drawing in his pocket. He told the students that machines rarely lie, but people often do when money is louder than conscience. He told them that brilliance without kindness becomes cruelty, and ambition without humility becomes a weapon. Near the back of the room sat Serafina Crow, quieter than anyone had ever seen her. She was not there as a CEO. She was there as a volunteer, helping fund safety scholarships for students who could not afford the program. Cashin noticed her, but did not stop speaking. Afterward, she approached him and apologized again, not with excuses, not with tears meant to soften him, but with the simple weight of responsibility. Cashin looked at her for a long moment and said that the people hurt by her choices deserved more than apologies. They deserved a future where no one like her could silence someone like him again. She nodded. And this time, she listened. Years later, when Maribel was old enough to understand, she asked her father if he had been scared that day in the hangar. Cashin smiled as they watched planes cross the evening sky. He told her he had been terrified. Not of the engine. Not of Serafina. Not even of losing his job. He had been afraid that after all those years of being invisible, his truth would still not matter. Maribel leaned against him and said it mattered to her. And that was enough. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your one small action can help remind someone out there that kindness still exists, second chances still happen, and no one should ever be measured by the job they are forced to do while surviving. Special request, comment, I believe in second chances, if Cashin's story moved you. Because sometimes the person sweeping the floor is the one who once built the sky. Sometimes the quietest soul in the room carries the loudest truth. And sometimes, when the world dares a broken man to prove his worth, he does not just fix an engine. He exposes the lies, saves the innocent, and teaches everyone watching that dignity can be hidden, delayed, and denied, but it can never truly be destroyed.